as a homage to Singapore, tonight's talk will be given in Singlish. Now, for those of you who either, like me, grew up around here or chose to make this beautiful country your home, I don't need to introduce what is Singlish. But for those of you who are new to what Singlish is, welcome to Singapore. So, for the benefit of the audience who are unfamiliar with English spoken in Singapore, there is a range, and best explained in a graphical form, because this, FYI, is a legitimate HTML input hall. Okay, no kidding. If you're interested in how to build like that, later come talk to me. But so today, right, I will try to keep the level somewhere in the middle. In the middle of Queen's English and Extreme Singlish. So in general, the mic don't like Singlish. In general, the R sound will sometimes sound like L. So like ready will become lady. And then also the V sound, sometimes you can just omit. So like government, you say garment. Or like never mind, you say never mind. Also, grammar is optional. Other than that, it should be mostly comprehensible. If you feel a lack of confidence about your standard of Singlish, please sit next to a friendly Singlish-speaking attendee, and I'm very sure they will explain it all to you. Okay, let's go. So, my name is Hui Jing, and I'm simple enough that emojis can more or less sum up my entire life. But this page is also a teaser of how Tokong CSS grid is. Tokong, okay, explanation time. Tokong means superb or top of the line. So this type of annotation will be sprinkled throughout the presentation so you can learn a bit of Singlish as well. But anyway, here's the teaser. So if you inspect element and you open Firefox DevTools and you try to inspect this thing, you'll see, ta-da, this kind of very beautiful overlay. Teaser only, later talk some more. So, close first. Okay, so right now, Nexmo pays my CPF. CPF is something that the government make companies who employ locals or permanent residents like me, they pay into your retirement fund. That is CPF. Anyway, Nexmo does communication API, so if like your app need like SMS voice or verification, I can consider trying Nexmo. But today, no Nexmo. Today, all about the layouts. So when the web started, right, no layout. At most, you can add text with spaces, line breaks, indents, that kind of thing. But you want to have a do until sui layout on your web page? Cannot. Sui. Hokkien for pretty. You can use to describe something already done. So you use this layout do until very sui. Yeah? So that's how you use sui. Moving on. First time we can put things in specific positions on a page was 1994 when table elements started getting supported in browsers. Then, you know, table element, right? Supposed to for you make data table, right? But like most things in life, kena misuse because developers discovered nesting. So in those days, right, the markup nest until very jialat. Next word, jialat. In Hokkien, it literally means to eat strength. So you use to denote being in trouble. For example, have you inspected Twitter lately? Wow, the markup nest until damn jialat. That's how you use jialat. Moving on. So then in 96, right, we got CSS. Then CSS got what? CSS got floats. So everybody need to learn new technique. But floats, very hard. Your column height not even. Your inline things all sengit. Sengit. Sengit, Malay for slanted or crooked. So like, how come the last item in the row sengit one? That's how you use. Okay, moving on. So because so hard, right? People, very, very kind people, right? They invented this thing called frameworks. So frameworks like Bootstrap, Foundation. So everybody else will use their CSS classes to build the layout. So this approach very popular. Then we move into the age where all websites start to look very similar. Okay. So this tweet, very overused, but very true, yeah? Like 6,800 people also agree with me. But the point is, CSS over the past 20 years has evolved. So now we got a lot of options for doing layout. So in CSS2, we got 4 layout modes. Got block layout to layout boxes. Got inline layout to layout text. Then got table layout. Supposed to be used for data, but of course, people misuse and use it for other things. And finally, we got position layout. So it's like an escape hatch. So your element don't care about other element on the page. But then in 2009, there's this very Tokong layout model called Flexbox is the very first Tokong layout model because it was built for the web. Because on the web, right, you cannot control how your user view your website. They can view on 70-inch TV, they can view on their smartwatch. You cannot control. So we need flexibility. And Flexbox, very flexible. And it also let us control spacing, control alignment of your items like never before. So it's very Tokong. And then after that, we got Grid. And Grid is the only layout model that recognizes the relationship between rows and columns. Also very Tokong. So you might be asking, so what? 2-dimension very Tokong meh? It's very Tokong because it changes the way we think about layout and how we write the code to do the layout. So Rachel Andrew, who is one of the major contributors to CSS Grid specification, she described Grid like that. She said, Grid works from the container in and other layout models work from item first. Okay, example time. Say you want to lay out your content into 3 columns. How you do? Can use inline block. So to make 3 columns, right, you set display to inline block, and then everybody the width must set to 1/3 of your container. Can use calc because CSS also can do maths, yo. So now I got 3 columns. Okay. Maybe you don't like inline block. Never mind. Can use floats. Floats very similar to inline block because your item also need width. Also use calc, can do maths. Then maybe you very modern, or must embrace new technology. Can use Flexbox. Flexbox also can. You just make the item not flexible. Then you set the flex basis to 1/3. But you see, you are also setting property on the item. So for all the 3 techniques I just described, right, don't have grid. Grid fake one. It just looks that way because you force all your items to align with each other. But when you use grid, the dimensions for the rows and columns, they are defined on the parent. So this means that this grid is real and you can place items inside your grid. And that is amazing. You're very dead, this audience. You're very Singapore max. Anyway, the basic usage of grid only need 2 steps. You define grid and then you place item inside. So you can either own self place or you let your browser place item for you. Okay, quite straightforward. Can. So then later got a bit of jargon, so we clarify here first. Grid lines are horizontal and vertical lines that form the basis of your grid structure. So you use a numerical index to reference the line. And okay, a bit small, but notice the index start from 1, not 0, because it's a programming language like Lua, not C. Each space between the grid line, they're called grid tracks. And then so these are the rows and ends of your grid. And then the grid cell there, it means it's a single unit of the grid. So it's made out of 2 adjacent row and column line, then there's 1 grid cell. So by default, each grid item will go into 1 grid cell. Many grid cells become grid area. But the best part about grid, right, is can have gaps. Okay, for those of you who don't do front end or you don't build a lot of layouts, you don't understand how magical it is to automatically have gaps between your columns. Because again, those of you never do front end, you don't understand the pain. Still no negative margin, then you need to padding, then you minus here, minus there. And then when you change your viewport size, then everything broken. No, now got property specially for you to define. Say, hey, I want gap 1M. You just put gap 1M. Whoa, amazing. So this feature has been expanded to Flexbox. So if you're using Firefox 63 and beyond, also can use gap in Flexbox now. So in 2017, Grid had a Sibei successful rollout. Sibei originate from Teochew, can be used to describe extremely or very. So like CSS Grid rollout in 2017, Sibei successful. That's how you use it. But at the end of March, right, all the major browsers have already shipped a stable implementation. And then even October, Samsung Internet and Edge also can support Grid. So right now, I know the text very small, cannot see, but trust me, more than 93% of internet users are already using a browser that supports Grid. So if your excuse for not using Grid is browser support, cannot update your excuse. So, okay, ever since I start using Grid, right, I always use Firefox DevTools. Why? Because the feature set for debugging Grid with DevTools is the most tokong feature set. But other than debugging, right, DevTools also can help us learn CSS. So, okay, don't talk so much. Example first. So this is a bunch of examples. This is Firefox. So when you activate your DevTools, see if you can zoom. I think cannot now. Okay, this is the max. So when you first activate DevTools, you will see in the inspector, if you are using Grid, Firefox will tell you are using Grid, which is great. You're like, hey, I already know I'm using Grid. But anyway, they'll show you this tag. Then this tag right out, you can see the cursor will change to means this. What does this mean? This means can click. So you click on it. You click, then you activate the overlay. So the overlay will show you how your Grid looks like. And okay, so some of you are thinking, okay, I don't like purple. You go to the layout panel. So Firefox will also tell you all the grids, can detect all the grids on your page, and it will tell you, let you toggle on or off. And then, okay, you don't like purple. I also don't know why you don't like purple. Purple is a nice color, right? But okay, say you don't like purple, change color lor. You can change to any color you want. This is helpful if you have if you've got multiple nested grids, so you can differentiate. But anyway, let's just stick to purple. Purple quite nice. So the basic structure of grid, we go back and look at the code, right? The grid syntax I personally quite like because it's a very visual syntax. So after you apply display grid, right, you define your grid using grid template columns and grid template rows. But you see, grid template column 3 value. Then you see how? 3 column. Grid template row got 2 value. You see? 2 rows. Very intuitive, very good. Then if you look at the markup, it's a grid container inside got 6 items. And I have defined a 6-cell grid. 3 by 2. So what the browser do? The browser just lay it out in order. So I'm like, okay, I'm not very impressive because, you know, last time from 20 years ago until now, browser also lay things out in sequence. Nothing exciting. Okay, so this is not exciting enough. Let's look at the second example. So what is this? This, for those of you who are not agent or maybe you just don't play board games, this is a board game called Go. This is the beginner version. So it's a 9 by 9. Board instead of 19 by 19. Honestly, it's because 19 by 19, I'm very tired. I cannot. So let's just I also don't know how to play Go, so we do the beginner version. So it's 9 by 9. So 9 column mean 10 lines. So this is the time where having the line numbers very important because if you look at the markup again, right, is one board inside got 4 pieces, and then I want to explicitly place my pieces. So if you go back to the layout, you can see got settings. Your settings can display line number or not, can display area name or not, and can do other things. But let's say don't have line numbers. You see, no line numbers. Do you want me to sit here and count line numbers to place the Go piece? Oh my God, my youth is slipping away, man. Cannot. So let's talk about the syntax for placing items. It's a lot like secondary school maths. You know, got X and Y coordinate. So you got grid row. So grid row 4, grid column 5. No numbers, very hard. Cannot. That's why this feature, very tokong. So let's turn on this feature and you see, ta-da, got line numbers. So I don't have to sit here and count lines. I can say, oh, okay, 5, I want it here, so it's 5 and 4. Excellent. This is an excellent feature. One more thing about Firefox DevTools is that UX feature. So if you look, this grid very close to the edge. So under normal circumstances, right, this label will be outside your window. But no, the Firefox DevTools team, they talk about this problem. Actually, it's got people complain, and then they go and update. But anyway, they have updated. And now as you can see, if at the edge, right, the label shift in. So you'll always be able to see your label. UX improvement, everybody. UX improvement. So another good feature, if you can see here, is display area names. Then you might think, display area name do what? Like now I explain to you, display area name do what? So let's look at this third grid, highlight. So at first, you're like, oh, okay, lor. Like that, lor. Nothing special, right? Wait, you turn on. Oh, very special. Now, you can see the area got name, and hence the naming grid areas. Why? English very straightforward, right? No, anyway, when you use grid template areas, is a property that you can add on to the template columns and template rows. Because when you define template columns and template rows, all you have is like numerical reference. And sometimes numerical reference is a bit unwieldy, especially if you're building like more full page layouts. Let's say you got like 20 elements on the page, right? Yeah, I mean, you can define each of your 20 grid items by counting line numbers. But if you're like me, I'm like, oh, counting line numbers is a waste of my youth. Then maybe you want to consider using name areas. So what you do is the syntax looks a bit not nice, but on your own code, right, you can kind of format it. If you use a monospace font, right, you can sort of format it. So it might be a bit blur for people at the back, but they are codes. So each code represents one row, and all the values inside the code represent column. So if for this example is a 6 by 6, so I should have six coded lines, and inside each code there should be 6 values. It should match up. If it doesn't match up, then browser say no, your code no good. So how you do is you can assign areas, your items area names. So inside this grid, there are 3 items. And if I highlight the code, you can see after I give the area a name, I will assign the name to my item. So first one is assign. I'm not very creative, so I just name it what I see. This is a Japanese door emoji, it's a sushi emoji, and a Tokyo Tower emoji. So you just call it door, call sushi, call tower, because creativity is in short supply here. So what's the interesting thing about this and the useful thing about this is that, again, like I mentioned, if you're doing responsive design for like full page layout with lots of elements, usually what you want is that at different viewports, you're going to change your layout. Your layout, you need to move around so the space is more better utilized, right? So instead of going to each of your grid items and adjusting their position per breakpoint, you isolate all your adjustments just to the grid template areas. So for example, okay, sushi don't need four cells, 2 cells can liao. So what we do is, you just make the change on the grid template areas property. And you don't have to touch, you don't have to go to the sushi item and change anything. Because once you assign the name to it, just leave it. And then you just adjust the size and the position of the item from the grid parent itself. So it makes your code more clean also. Yeah, that's the useful thing about template areas. And the fact that Firefox supports the display of area names, it makes it so much easier to work with. Last example for grid, right, is animating grid rows and columns. So a lot of people actually don't know can animate grid rows and columns. Actually, this feature was written into the spec from day one. It's just that when something written into the spec versus when something implemented in browser, they're not the same stories. Like, eh. So anyway, Firefox 66 onwards start to support animating rows and grids. So I don't highlight, I just show you this thing. The first thing because the first time I saw this style of implementation, right, I was like, huh, grid item can jump grid track one. Actually cannot. Because if you think about how animation works, right, animation must interpolate a value. Items jumping grid track is not interpolating a value, it's magic. And cannot do magic. So what's good about, again, DevTools is that when you highlight, right, then you see the truth. And the truth is, the background is a lie. Okay, let's look at how fake this background is. The background is linear gradient, yo. Yeah, the background is a lie. It's not a 3 by 3 grid at all. It's only 2 by 2. And what the animation does is it's interpolating the size of your first grid cell. So it's becoming wider, then becoming longer, then shrinking back. So the good thing about Firefox DevTools grid overlay is that when they ship the ability for you to animate the grid, right, they match the overlay to support the animation as well. So I think this is the part where we can use we can use DevTools to sort of learn and understand CSS better. As long as the browser is able to ship the new feature with supporting DevTools, right, we can actually use the DevTools to visualize a lot of these newer CSS properties. And that's one of my favorite things about Firefox DevTools. But okay, so I feel that I have convinced you that grid very tokong. If you still don't think it's very tokong, I also don't know what more I can say. So I'm just gonna assume that you're on the boat. So what can make grid even more tokong? Level 2. So okay, this level thing, right? CSS got specs. CSS specs got level 1. So let's explain the level a bit. Long story short, The CSS spec used to be like very long, it's very long document for the first two versions. But then in 2000, it got split up into modules. So like the editors, it's easier for them to test, maintain this specification. And this split up version, right, is the one where everybody call CSS3. It's the one where, oh, you put in your resume, I know CSS3 and HTML5, please hire me. Yeah, that's the version you're using. But there will never be a CSS4 or 5 or so on. So don't put that in your resume. It's a dead giveaway that you don't know what you're talking about. Don't do it. Because now each CSS feature is a separate document. So when a feature grows too big or something inside need more discussion, right, it will get deferred to the next level. For example, like media queries, right, now up to level 5 already. Then things like the newer things like, say, let me think, containment. Containment only level 1 because it's very new. So that's how the module and the level system works. So subgrid, right? Subgrid has always been very important, but because there are a lot of edge cases that people need to take care of, it needed more time to make sure that you implement it very sui, right? So it got deferred to level 2. So level 2 of the spec, right, got subgrid, which is nested grid, I'll explain later, and another thing called aspect ratio control gutters. Not going to talk about that today, only subgrid. So, you're like, why need subgrid? Grid already very good. Correct, grid already very good, but subgrid makes it better. So subgrid got quite a few use cases. Because what subgrid actually does is it let the nested grid line up with the outermost grid. So for example, because everybody and their cat want like this kind of cut style layout, and then many times your designer just assumes that everyone speaks the same amount of lorem-ism and give you the Photoshop is like, oh, everything, the header and footer are same size, huh? Then you're like, okay, sure. And then when you implement, right, you realize that the header content and the footer content all different. Then everything is sang. So you implement all the content different length, then jialat, right? Or if you wanted to align inline forms where your label and your form input, you want your label to all line up together vertically, right? Also very hard, also cannot. So what we used to do is that you don't even implement this, you just put the label on top of the input, right? But now, with subgrid can, because with subgrid, your grandchild elements actually know about the parent grid. So we will look at a bit more of example. Okay, before that, right, got syntax. Okay, this syntax look a bit chim, but later got example, then easier to see. The most important thing here to know is that the subgrid keyword is a sizing keyword. So you don't put display subgrid, cannot, salah. If you want to use subgrid, the browser, when you do that, the browser will know that your nested grid should follow the size of the outermost grid. And it's also possible to keep nesting subgrid. But like, don't do this jialat nesting, okay? So again, a reminder, when you use subgrid, you use it inside grid template columns or grid template rows. Your display still must use grid. Just if you don't remember anything else of the nonsense that I say today, just remember this part. So, okay, example time. So, subgrid can use in a single dimension. What does this mean? Okay, highlight, then you can see. So this is where the multiple colors thing really come like very, very useful. So when you highlight your nested and your parent grid, right, you can see the difference. So, okay, again, numbers a bit small, but for numbering, what you can see is that even though your subgrid follow the size of the parent, right, the subgrid index start from 1. So on the parent is line number is 3, but when you start a subgrid, it will start from 1 again. Okay, that's one of the basic things. But okay, so you can define it along a single dimension. So for this particular example, right, if you look at the rules, I make the columns, highlight the subgrid. Wait, okay, here. I make the columns subgrid, but the rows on self anyhow. Excuse me. Hello. Yeah. So when you set subgrid on the columns, it will follow your parent grid. But because the rows never set, right, the row can own size is anyhowly size also can. So similarly, if you do it for rows, the rows dimension, right, this is actually the same example, different dimension. So okay, unhighlight this, highlight this. So you can see the code is that now subgrid put on rows, right, it will follow the parent rows. But again, column can own self anyhow, right? So this is what I mean by single dimension. Another feature of subgrid is that the way gaps are handled is also slightly different from a normal nested grid. So when you have a grid, you can apply gaps, which we've all agreed that gap is an amazing property. So by default, right, the child grid will adopt the same value of gap as the parent, but you can override. So for this example, I override already. So when I do this, when I highlight subgrid, you can see that on the parent, the grid is 1M. Then on the subgrid, I override to 2M. So if you look at the lighter number 2, this is a grandchild element. And number 4 is a child element. They are in the same column. They should be sized the same. But because the gap for the subgrid is bigger, right? Number 2 is actually a bit smaller than number 4. So this, the gaps on your subgrid is going to affect the sizing of your grandchildren element. So it's something to keep in mind if you need to adjust the gap for your subgrids or your nested subgrid, it might affect the sizing. If you need things to line up exactly, maybe sometimes this might be an issue. And so other than gaps, right, even paddings and margin borders, they will accumulate. So this is a case of jialat nesting. So I mean, I can do lah, but maybe don't do lah. But when you do, right, if you want to nest you have a grid, you have a subgrid, and then you have a subgrid, what's going to happen is at the edge. So if you look at number two is at the edge of the grid. Any padding, margin, and borders accumulate. So even though the great grandchild element is aligned with the second column of the parent grid, right, the size is very small. Why? Because the margin, padding, and borders already eat into the sizing for number 2. But if you look at number 3, which is also a great grandchild element, the size not affected because it's not at the edge. So this what do you call this? This situation only happens at the edge of your grid. So when your nested grids have their own padding and margin, it is something to keep in mind, and it will affect the sizing of elements, especially if you want all your elements to be the same size. This is something that might happen at the edge. One more thing is there's no implicit grid tracks. Okay, so the way grid works, right, is that if you have items that fall beyond your defined grid, right, the browser will automatically generate more tracks for the item to fit in. But when you're using subgrid, you cannot define more cells than your subgrid covers. So we highlight here, and then you can see this is a grid, and this is a subgrid. So the subgrid here that I've defined, right, is a two row, 2 column area. Inside my subgrid, even if I choose to size it to the width of 3 columns, the browser will clamp it. The browser like, no, your subgrid only got to this size, so I'm not going to expand this any further. So even if I like spend 4, 5, 6, 7, right, it will forever be 2, right? So that's what we mean by no implicit. The browser is not going to generate more columns inside the subgrid to hold your item. It doesn't work that way. So similarly, if you look at this second example, right, unhighlight everything. Okay, the multi overlay only support up to 3 because life is not perfect. So let's just all accept this and then. So this is also a grid. The subgrid is 6 by 6 cells, so 3 by 2, right? So inside here, actually, I got 6 items. So let's say I change the size of the subgrid. So instead of a 6 cell, right, I change to 2 cell. So what's going to happen is that it was A, B, C, D, E, F. So E and F, right, end up all get stacked up onto the last track because there's no space really. So it's not going to spill over. It's just, everybody just overlay on top of each other, never mind. Yeah. So this is how subgrid works. And especially when you're doing if you're using subgrid to size, you may need to match the number of items inside. Okay, so I very over time. So just now all the use cases that I talked about, right? the code is also here, and this will be shared with everybody later. So you can just use Firefox DevTools, use latest edition to inspect, and then you can see how it's done. So I'm going to go back to the slides and just show you browser support. There's a moral to this. The moral is life is not perfect. But so browser support for Subgrid a bit sad here. But so this is a reason why more of us need to try, need to build things with Subgrid, need to talk about it, complain about it if you must, because any publicity is good publicity. So when there is publicity, right, then other browser makers will also prioritize Subgrid and then ship it sooner. So yeah, please don't say don't use, must use. Good things must share. So anyway, if you are interested to learn more about Grid and Subgrid, all these links are very helpful. And definitely download a copy of Firefox. Plus points if you use nightly version, because life is short, take some risk. Thanks, yeah.